My girlfriend leaned across the table at the crowded rooftop bar and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "All my friends have boyfriends who actually care about their dreams, and mine just wants me to stay small." The music was thumping, string lights flickered overhead, and her three closest friends from grad school, Lila, Serena, and Naomi, went suddenly quiet. I felt every pair of eyes land on me while I sat there holding my untouched beer. I set the bottle down carefully, pulled out my wallet, laid enough cash to cover the entire tab plus a generous tip, and stood up. "Enjoy the rest of your night," I said, voice steady. Then I walked down the stairs, out onto the street, and called a rideshare home. That was 3 years ago. I'm sharing it now because last weekend she showed up at my sister's baby shower with tears in her eyes, begging for another chance. And I finally feel ready to put the whole thing into words. I met Claire at a coffee shop near campus when I was 28 and finishing my master's in civil engineering. She was 26, working on her PhD in environmental policy, and had this fierce passion when she talked about climate solutions that made the whole room feel brighter. We bonded over shared frustration with the city's outdated infrastructure and ended up talking for hours. For the first year and a half, everything felt effortless. She'd come over after long lab days, collapse on my couch, and let me cook her simple pasta while she vented about grant deadlines. I'd listen, rub her shoulders, and remind her how brilliant her research was. She'd smile sleepily and tell me I grounded her in a way nobody else ever had. I thought we were building something solid. The shift started when she grew closer to her new cohort friends. Lila was dating a tech founder who'd already sold his first startup. Serena's partner was a documentary filmmaker traveling the world for projects. Naomi's boyfriend ran a sustainability nonprofit that got constant media attention. They were all ambitious, loud, and always planning the next big thing. Claire began coming home from their meetups quieter than usual. She'd mention how Lila's boyfriend flew them to conferences first class so she could network, or how Serena's partner collaborated with her on grant proposals and co-authored papers. At first, the comments were casual observations, but soon they carried weight. I encouraged her constantly. I proofread her fellowship applications, helped her rehearse conference presentations, stayed up late discussing her data models. When she worried her ideas weren't bold enough, I reminded her how groundbreaking her approach to urban flood mitigation could be. But gradually, my support started feeling invisible to her. She began saying things like, "You're so steady, Alex," in a tone that made steady sound like stagnant. She'd scroll through her friends' stories, photos from TEDx stages, panel discussions, award ceremonies, and sigh. I suggested we plan a weekend away so she could recharge, and she'd reply, "I need to be around people who push me forward, not just comfortable." Group hangouts became painful. We'd meet at trendy bars or co-working spaces turned event venues, and conversation always circled back to who'd just landed which grant, who was speaking where, whose partner was championing their career. I tried to join in, sharing how my firm was implementing some of her flood modeling concepts in a city contract, but eyes would glaze over or someone would pivot to the next big announcement. Claire stopped introducing me as her partner who was helping bring her research into real infrastructure projects. Instead, I became Alex, he's in engineering. She rarely corrected people when they assumed I was just another cubicle drone doing routine work. I started dreading invitations. Yet she insisted these connections were vital for her career, so I kept showing up, smiling, paying for rounds when checks came. The night on the rooftop marked the breaking point. It was meant to celebrate Naomi's boyfriend receiving a major innovation award. Bottles of champagne appeared, toasts flew, and everyone glowed with reflected success. I'd just come from a 12-hour day finalizing designs for a bridge retrofit that incorporated several of Claire's resilience principles. But nobody asked about my week. Halfway through the evening, Serena's partner raised a glass and said, "To partners who lift us up and make us better versions of ourselves." Everyone cheered. Claire didn't look at me. Later, after several rounds, she turned to the table and delivered her line about my wanting her to stay small. Her friends shifted uncomfortably. Even they seemed shocked by how cutting it was. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply paid and left. When I got home, I sat on the balcony staring at the city lights for a long time. The woman I loved had just announced publicly that my support, my belief in her, my steady presence, all of it made her feel diminished. I realized I'd spent months shrinking myself to avoid being seen as an anchor dragging her down. She stumbled in around 2 a.m., giggling with Lila, clearly expecting me to help her to bed like always. I stayed in the guest room. Morning came and she breezed into the kitchen as if nothing had happened, asking if I wanted to grab brunch with everyone. When I brought up what she'd said, she laughed it off. I was tipsy and frustrated about my latest rejection letter. I didn't mean it like that. But she had meant it. I could see it in the way she'd been pulling away, in every sigh when I talked about long-term plans that included stability alongside ambition. I need some space, I told her. I'm going to stay with my brother for a while. She rolled her eyes. Don't turn this into drama. We'll talk when you're less sensitive. I packed a duffel that afternoon and left. The calls started immediately, first annoyed, then angry, then pleading. By day 4 she was leaving voicemails about how much she missed me and how we could work through it. I didn't respond. I needed clarity, and her voice clouded everything. Living with my brother gave me room to breathe. I worked out in the mornings, cooked proper meals, read books I'd neglected. I realized how much energy I'd poured into proving I was enough for someone who'd already decided I wasn't. After 2 weeks, I returned while she was at a symposium, packed the rest of my belongings, and left my key with a short note. I wish you every success. Take care. I changed apartments, switched my phone number, blocked her across platforms. Mutual friends reached out on her behalf. I politely declined to engage. Work became my anchor. The bridge project advanced, incorporating more of her concepts than I'd expected. Ironically, because my team valued the practicality I brought. I received recognition internally, then an offer to lead a new regional resilience initiative. I accepted. I traveled for site visits, collaborated with city planners, mentored junior engineers. Life felt purposeful again. Word filtered back through shared professional circles. Claire dated intensely policy wonks, startup founders, activists with big platforms. None lasted. Some dismissed her research focus as too niche. Others wanted arm candy more than intellectual partnership. She complained to anyone who'd listen that ambitious men only wanted submissive women now. Her friend group fractured over time. Lila's tech founder boyfriend turned out to be inflating his success. When investors pulled out, their relationship imploded. Serena's documentary partner took credit for joint work she'd done, sparking a public dispute. Naomi's award-winning boyfriend was revealed to have exaggerated impact metrics for funding. Suddenly, the shining examples weren't so shiny that I dated casually after about a year, coffee meetups, hiking dates, women who asked about my projects with genuine curiosity. It was healing to be seen without apology. That's how I met Lauren. We connected at a community workshop on coastal resilience. She was 31, a landscape architect specializing in living shorelines. When I explained the bridge retrofit and how we'd adapted academic models for real-world constraints, she leaned forward, eyes bright, asking follow-up questions that showed she actually understood the challenges. We talked until organizers kicked us out. Over the next months, dating her felt effortless in the best way. She celebrated my promotion, stayed up late brainstorming solutions when I hit design roadblocks, and told me my calm focus was exactly what made my leadership effective. When I cooked for her, nothing fancy, just roasted vegetables and salmon, she raved like it was Michelin-starred. When she landed a major public project, I helped her refine the presentation and cheered louder than anyone. We moved in together after a year. She fit into my life without demanding I change shape to accommodate hers. Last month, we got engaged on a quiet stretch of beach after a site visit. I didn't rent a drone or hire photographers. Just us, the waves, and a ring I'd saved for carefully. She cried happy tears and said yes before I finished the question. We kept the engagement simple. A backyard gathering at my sister's new house, string lights, potluck dishes, kids running around, family and close friends, laughter everywhere. I was refilling the ice bucket when I noticed a familiar figure hovering near the side gate. Claire, dressed far too formally for a casual barbecue, clutching a small wrapped box, looking hesitant. My chest tightened, but I walked over calmly. "Hey," she said softly. "I heard through the department grapevine. Congratulations." "Thanks. You shouldn't be here, Claire." "I know. I just wanted to say I'm happy for you, and to apologize properly this time." I waited. "I was awful," she continued, voice trembling. "I let comparison poison everything good we had. You were always supporting me, believing in me more than I believed in myself, and I threw it away because I wanted validation from people who turned out to be hollow." I nodded once. "I've spent years trying to find someone who sees me the way you did, and I can't, because I didn't appreciate it when I had it." "That's unfortunate," I said, "but it doesn't change where I am now." She swallowed. "She seems wonderful. The way you look at her. I remember when you used to look at me like that." "I'm glad you've reflected," I replied. "Truly, growth matters. But this is Lauren's and my day. Please respect that and go." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. "I understand. Take care, Alex." She turned and walked back to her car. I watched until taillights disappeared, then returned to the party. Lauren found me a few minutes later, slipped her hand into mine. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, kissing her temple. "Just tying up an old loose end. Nothing important." We rejoined our friends, music playing softly, children laughing, future stretching bright ahead. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, unapologetically at peace.